Ever feel like reality is kind of a choose-your-own-adventure? Less fixed storyline and more like, well, we have some choices. Today, we're going to deep dive into this mind-bending world where matter and consciousness kind of collide, I guess you could say.
Hmm. Interesting way to put it.
Well, we're looking at excerpts from this text. Matter merges into consciousness.
Yeah, this text, it's really interesting because it pulls from, science and the mysticism.
Right, like quantum physics and ancient mysticism all in one.
Exact.
So by the end of this, you'll not only get the main ideas, but hopefully walk away with some serious questions to ponder. Now, the text starts off with this thing called the physicist's paradox, focusing on the observer effect in quantum mechanics.
I'm intrigued already.
Me too, me too.
So the observer effect, it's like a key principle of quantum mechanics. It really highlights that strange relationship between, like, observing something and what reality actually I.
Yeah, it's kind of trippy.
It is, and it's tied to this concept of wave-particle duality. Basically, particles exist as probabilities. Kind of like, imagine a wave spread out in space until they're observed.
Hold on, so they're like, wait, let me decide what I am once someone's looking.
You could say that. It's like they're waiting for that observation to collapse into a defined state.
But then this observation thing, are we talking like a human actually looking at something? What counts as observation here?
That's really where the paradox gets interesting. In the quantum world, observation, it doesn't necessarily mean a conscious person looking. It could be any interaction with the environment, like, bumping into another particle or even an instrument designed to detect it. The act of measuring itself, it's like it forces that waves-like particle to kind of choose a position or a state.
Okay, so it's not about us humans being at the center of everything and just like deciding reality with our thoughts.
No, it's not quite that straightforward. It's more nuanced. Think of scientific models as maps, to help us navigate the universe. These maps, they're incredibly useful, don't get me wrong,
For sure.
but they're still human-made. They might not be perfect replicas of the actual terrain, right?
Right.
The observer effect, it pushes us to think about the limits of our models and how just by measuring something, we might be affecting the reality we're trying to observe.
Wow. So are WE shaping reality by observing it, or are we just limited by our own ways of seeing and measuring?
Exactly. Starting to feel a bit like Alice down the rabbit hole, are we?
A little bit, yeah.
And that's just the beginning. The source then goes on to introduce a mystical perspective from this. WaXhira, Grand Master of the Sacred Atlantean Brotherhood.
Wait, hold on. Atlantean Brotherhood sounds like fantasy novel territory.
It does. It does. According to the source, the Sacred Atlantean Brotherhood, they're like a lineage of mystics. They trace their teachings way back to, the legendary Atlantis.
Okay, so Atlantis, debatable whether it actually existed.
Right. Probably a discussion for another time.
But for now, let's focus on their, core teachings, as presented in the text.
Exactly.
All right, so what does this WaXhira have to say about all this matter and consciousness stuff?
His core touching is that matter and consciousness, they're not separate. They're two sides of the same coin, like totally intertwined, can't have one without the other.
Hmm.
He uses the analogy of deep meditation to explain it.
Okay, I can kind of see that. When you're meditating deeply, you do get this sense of boundaries dissolving, feeling connected to everything around you.
Exactly. And in this state, the difference between the observer and what's observed, it fades away, leading to these profound insights beyond our normal perception.
So he's saying this feeling of oneness, it's not just subjective, something that happens in meditation, but a fundamental truth about reality itself.
Yeah, that's the essence of his teaching. And this whole idea, transcending the illusion of separation, recognizing that everything's connected, you see this in mysticism, but also in different areas of science too.
Now that's where it gets really interesting to me. We've got the physicist wrestling with what the observer effect means, and the mystic saying everything's ultimately one. Are they really that far apart in their thinking?
Now that is the question. Is there some bridge between science and mysticism? Maybe they're just different paths up the same mountain, looking for the same truth about reality.
You mentioned this connectedness idea in science. Any examples of scientists dipping their toes into this mystical stuff?
Oh, absolutely. Lots of big-name scientists throughout history have had this deep reverence for the universe's mysteries, stuff that goes beyond just the material explanations.
Like Einstein, right? He said that the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. But how did this mysterious thing actually affect his work?
Well, Einstein, he believed that the universe had this deep elegance and harmony. And that belief drove his search for a unified theory, to explain all the fundamental forces of nature. He saw science as this spiritual quest, uncovering the hidden order and beauty beneath all the complexity.
So for him, the mysterious wasn't just some vague idea. It was like fuel for his scientific work. Never thought of it like that.
And Einstein wasn't alone. Niels Bohr, huge in quantum mechanics, he often compared quantum paradoxes to Eastern philosophy.
So to grasp these mind-blowing quantum ideas, maybe we need a shift in consciousness, a willingness to go beyond our purely material worldview.
Exactly. He hinted that the observer effect wasn't just a quirk of the quantum world, but a reflection of something deeper, suggesting observer and observed are connected at a really fundamental level.
This is making me rethink how I approach problems, Like, if we embrace this interconnectedness idea, could we find solutions we wouldn't have seen before?
That's a fascinating question, and it's actually what we're going to explore further in the next part of our deep dive.
So in part one, we were talking about the observer effect. It really makes you question that whole idea of us being separate from the world out there. Like, maybe we play a role in shaping reality, even on a tiny subatomic level. But how does that play out in our everyday lives? I mean, really?
That's where things get even more interesting. If our consciousness does influence reality, even subtly, then it kind of makes sense that our thoughts, beliefs, and intentions, they can have more power than we think.
Okay, but that could sound a little woo-woo to some people, right? You're not saying we can, like, wish for $1 million and poof, it appears.
No, it's not about magical thinking. It's more about recognizing how our inner world and the outer world are connected. Like WaXhira said, matter and consciousness, they're intertwined. So our inner states, our thoughts, emotions, beliefs, they're not just happening in isolation, they rivel outwards.
So it's like our minds are always projecting this reality filter, shaping how we see things and what we experience.
That's a great way to put it. And it ties back to those scientific models we talked about before. Just like our scientific models are, human creations that shape how we understand the universe. Our mental models are beliefs. They shape our own individual realities.
But doesn't that make reality seem super subjective? If we're all creating our own realities based on what we believe, then what's real anymore?
That's a good point. It's important to remember, even though our individual perspectives color our experiences, there's still a shared reality, a collective experience we're all part of. Think of it like everyone's holding a piece of a giant puzzle. We might be focused on our own little piece, but they all fit together to make a bigger picture.
So it's a balance between acknowledging that our realities are subjective, but also recognizing that we're all contributing to this larger interconnected thing.
Exactly, and that's where intention comes in. If consciousness does influence reality even a little bit, then our intentions, our desires, our focus energy, they can play a role in how things unfold.
So it's not just passively watching reality, it's actively taking part in creating it through our intentions.
You got it. And this brings us back to WaXhira. He was big on the idea that this unity of matter and consciousness, you experience it most strongly during deep meditation.
Right, we talked about that feeling of oneness, boundaries dissolving in deep meditation. But how does that connect to intention?
Well, think of meditation as training for your mind to cultivate awareness and direct your intention. In deep meditation, you're practicing observing your thoughts and emotions without judging, letting them come and go without getting swept away. And that cultivated awareness, you can apply it to everyday life. You become more aware of your thoughts, beliefs, intentions, and how they might be shaping your experiences.
So it's like building up those mental muscles so we can be more intentional in how we interact with the world.
That's the idea. And this whole practice of cultivating awareness and intention, it's not just some esoteric, mystical thing. It's making its way into mainstream scientific research, too.
Really? What kind of research is going on there?
There's more and more research in fields like neuroscience and quantum biology. They're exploring this connection between consciousness and the physical world. Some studies even suggest that focused intention, like in meditation, can have measurable effects on things like physiological processes, brainwave patterns, even the behavior of subatomic particles.
Wow, that's incredible. So we're seeing ancient wisdom and modern science coming together, both suggesting that consciousness might play a much bigger role in shaping reality than we thought.
Exactly. And this leads us to the question of practical applications. How can we use these concepts in our everyday lives to create positive change?
That's what I'm really curious about. We've talked about some pretty mind-blowing stuff, but it'd be great to see how it can actually benefit us. What advice would you give to someone who wants to start applying these principles?
One practical step is to make mindfulness part of your daily routine. It's about paying attention to the present moment without judgment, becoming more aware of your thoughts, feelings, and sensations as they happen.
I've heard about mindfulness, but isn't that just a fancy way of saying pay attention? How does that tie into this idea of matter and consciousness being intertwined?
Well, by being more mindful, we start to notice the subtle ways our thoughts and emotions affect how we see and do things. We become aware of those filters we're projecting onto the world and how those filters might be limiting us.
So it's like we're becoming more aware of the observer effect in action, not just in the quantum world, but in our everyday lives.
Precisely. And as we become more aware of our inner world, we can make more conscious choices about how we react to things. Instead of just automatically reacting based on old patterns and beliefs, we can pause, observe, and choose a more skillful, intentional way to respond.
That makes a lot of sense, but it sounds like it takes a lot of work and practice to get to that level of awareness.
It does take effort and discipline, but the benefits are worth it. As you get better at mindfulness, you might notice more clarity, more calmness, a stronger sense of connection in your life. You might find yourself handling challenges with more grace and ease, and feeling a deeper sense of purpose and meaning.
That's inspiring. It sounds like mindfulness is key to unlocking the potential of this connection between matter and consciousness. We go from passive observers to active participants, shaping our realities.
Exactly. And as we become more conscious creators of our own reality, we also start to see how connected we are to everything around us. We see that our actions, thoughts, intentions, they ripple out, affecting not just ourselves, but the world as a whole.
Which brings us back to that question. If our observations shape reality, what kind of world do we want to create? What thoughts, beliefs, and intentions do we choose to put out there?
As we move into the final part of our deep dive,
Mm.
I want you to think about those questions and consider how you can live in a way that reflects this interconnected worldview.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into matter and consciousness. We've talked about the observer effect, WaXhira's ideas, even mindfulness and intention. But there's this one piece I'm really curious about, the ethical side of this whole interconnected worldview.
Yeah, that's a big one we haven't really gotten into yet.
Yeah.
If our thoughts, intentions, actions, they all have this ripple effect, not just on us, but the world around us, then what kind of responsibility do we have for the reality we're creating together?
It's kind of like suddenly realizing we're not just in our own little bubbles, we're part of this shared experience, this giant tapestry, right?
Exactly. And it can feel both empowering and kind of scary. It makes you think about the consequences of what you do, not just for yourself, but for everything and everyone.
So how do we even start navigating this ethical landscape
Yeah.
where our choices have these big implications because everything's so interconnected?
Well, I think a good first step is to shift our perspective. Move away from just thinking about ourselves and towards a more holistic view. Instead of just focusing on what we need and want, we can start considering the well-being of the whole, recognizing that our actions affect others and the environment.
Right, so it's like expanding our circle of compassion, not just ourselves and the people we care about, but all beings and even the planet itself.
Yeah, exactly. And that shift in how we see things, it can change the choices we make. We might make different decisions about what we buy, how we use resources, how we treat others.
I can see how this could lead to a more sustainable way of living, a more compassionate way. But it also sounds like a lot of responsibility. Can we really make a difference as individuals when the world's problems seem so huge and complicated?
It's easy to feel overwhelmed, for sure. But it's important to remember every act of kindness, every conscious choice, every positive intention, it all adds to the shift.
So it's not about trying to solve everything ourselves, but focusing on what we can control, our own thoughts and actions, and trusting those ripples will spread out.
That's a beautiful way to think about it. And the source we're looking at, it suggests that by embracing this interconnected view and living accordingly, we not only make the world a better place, but we also find more purpose and fulfillment in our own lives.
So it's not just about self-sacrifice, it's recognizing that our well-being is tied to the well-being of everything else.
Precisely. When we contribute to the well-being of others and the planet, we create a more harmonious environment for ourselves to thrive in too.
It's like we're all part of this one big ecosystem, and when we take care of the ecosystem, we're taking care of ourselves too, right?
Exactly. And this brings us back to mindfulness. When we cultivate that present moment awareness, we become more tuned in to our interconnectedness, more aware of how our actions impact everything around us.
So mindfulness isn't just for personal growth, it's a way to live more ethically, more in tune with this idea that everything's connected.
Absolutely. By practicing mindfulness, we become more conscious creators of our reality, making choices that are in line with our values and they contribute to the greater good.
This deep dive has really changed how I think about matter and consciousness. We started with quantum physics, explored mystical teachings, and even looked at how mindfulness can help us shape our reality.
And along the way, we've seen how these different areas of knowledge, they're all pointing towards a deeper understanding of how interconnected everything really is and how we fit into that bigger picture.
It's definitely given me a lot to think about. If our observations shape reality, what kind of world do we want to create? What kind of thoughts, beliefs, and intentions are we going to put out there?
I think that's a great place to leave it. As we wrap up, I encourage you to reflect on those questions. Think about how you can live in a way that embraces this interconnectedness. Remember, every little bit of awareness, every conscious choice, every positive intention, it all contributes to a more compassionate, sustainable, and harmonious world.
This has been an incredible journey. Thank you for joining us. Keep those questions coming, stay curious, and keep exploring because the deeper we dive, the more amazing it gets.